Texas, 1886. In Willow Creek, the Cowboys were the heroes. Everyone knew this. It was not a matter of opinion. It was simply the order of things, as established and unquestioned as the direction the river ran. Cowboys arrived on horseback with dust on their coats and stories on their tongues, and the town received them the way a town receives people who have come from somewhere interesting. They sat tall in their saddles. They tipped their hats. They made everything look like the beginning of a story worth telling. Ethan Carter made horseshoes. He was 21 years old, broad-shouldered from a decade at the anvil. He had started as an apprentice at 11 when his father's hands gave out from the iron sickness, the slow lung damage that came from years of breathing coal dust without a cloth over his face. He had learned early that the forge was not romantic. It was a place of controlled burning, of heat that cracked lips and dried eyes, of iron that left permanent marks on your hands whether you were careful or not. He had 5 years of apprenticeship and 4 years of running the forge alone, which made him, by the standards of Willow Creek, experienced enough for everything the town needed. He was at the forge before sunrise and finished after dark, and in between he shod horses and mended plows and fixed Widow Patterson's gate without charging her for it, and came home so tired some evenings that he fell asleep at the kitchen table with his boots still on. The town knew him the way you know furniture present useful taken for granted. He did not mind this. What was not enough, and what he had not told anyone, was that he had noticed Clara Bennett the moment she stepped off the stage in September. He had been across the street fixing the hinge on the general store door. She had looked at Willow Creek the way you look at a horse before you buy it, searching for the defects but hoping to find virtues. Then she had looked across the street and seen him. He had looked back for exactly 1 second before going back to the hinge. He went back to the hinge. He finished the hinge. He went back to the forge, and he did not think about the way she had looked at him directly without the usual polite indifference people gave the blacksmith for the rest of the afternoon. He thought about it all evening. He thought about it, if he was honest, considerably longer than that. She came to the forge 3 weeks after she arrived. She had a lantern, the old one from the schoolhouse, broken since before she took the position. She held it against her chest as she walked across town. It wasn't just a broken piece of metal. It was a threadbare excuse to be there, and she was perfectly aware of that. Ethan was at the anvil when she arrived, working a length of iron into a hinge with the focused economy of movement that comes from 10 years of repetition. He heard her hesitate at the forge door. Everyone hesitated at the forge door. The heat hit you first, then the noise, then the smell of coal and burning iron that went into your clothes and stayed there. He finished his stroke before he looked up. "Miss Bennett," he said. She looked slightly surprised that he knew her name. In Willow Creek, everyone knew everyone within the first week. She held up the lantern. He took it and turned it in his hands, reading it the way a doctor reads a patient, looking for the actual problem, not just the presenting one. "The hinge is bent," she said. "The hinge is bent," he agreed. "But fix the hinge without fixing the base and it'll bend again in a month. The fitting is loose. That's what's been causing it." Nobody mentioned the base. Nobody looked that closely. He said this without judgment, just accurately the way he assessed everything. "How long?" she said. "Come back Thursday," he said. She came back Thursday. The lantern was fixed. Hinge, base, and a small crack in the housing she hadn't noticed, filled without mention. She looked at it for a moment. "You fixed the crack." "It was there," he said. "It would have let water in eventually." She paid him less than she expected and thanked him and left. She was back the following Tuesday with a broken desk hinge from the schoolroom. The Tuesday after that with a window latch. The Tuesday after that with nothing at all, which she addressed by asking whether she could watch him work, because she was writing a lesson about metalwork for the older students, and needed to understand the process. Ethan Carter, who had never been watched and was not sure what to do about it, said yes. What she did not tell him, and what he would not have believed, was that she had stopped writing the metalwork lesson in October. She was in her third week of coming to the forge for no reason she was willing to name out loud. Wade Holloway arrived in November. He was 24 years old, the most admired cowboy in the county, broad-shouldered, easy laughing with the kind of confidence that comes from being told, "You are remarkable," often enough that it has settled into something comfortable. He wore good boots. His horse was the finest in the county. His stories were long and entertaining and frequently true. He had decided with the calm certainty of a man accustomed to getting what he decided that Clara Bennett was exactly what he had been looking for. He appeared at the schoolhouse on a Wednesday afternoon with flowers, arranged ones ordered from the next town. Clara received them with warmth and the specific internal reaction of a woman who knows what arranged flowers mean and is measuring how to respond without cruelty. He was not a bad man. This was the problem. He was genuinely pleasant. Good manners, good intentions. Completely wrong. The town approved enthusiastically. "Wade Holloway," said Martha Greer at the general store. "Good family, steady work. Everyone respects him. He's been asking about you 3 times this week." Clara bought her flour. "He invited you to the Christmas social yet?" Martha said. "Not yet," Clara said. "He will," Martha said with the confidence of a woman who considers this a settled matter. "Who turns down Wade Holloway?" Clara looked at the mountains to the west, the particular look of a person who has already decided something and is not ready to say it out loud. "He's very kind," she said. Martha looked at her the way she looked at accounts that didn't balance. "But," she said. "No, but," Clara said pleasantly. She paid for her flour. On her way out, she looked across the street at the forge, at the steady sound of hammer on iron, the same sound she heard every morning when she walked to school, and every evening when she walked home. She had started timing her route to pass the forge. She had not examined why. She was starting to examine it now. What Clara had not expected when she started coming to the forge was to understand what the work cost. Not money. She understood that quickly enough, because Ethan charged less than he should for almost everything and nothing at all for the things he judged people couldn't afford. The economics of the Willow Creek Forge in 1886 were straightforward. Iron was expensive in Texas, still recovering from the supply disruptions of the war, and coal for the furnace had to come in by wagon from the railhead, a day's journey east. Every shoe, every tool, every repair had a real cost that Ethan absorbed partly himself. What she had not understood was the physical cost. She had seen the calloused hands and the permanent soot on the 3rd day. What she began to notice as October became November was the tiredness that settled into him by late afternoon. Not complaint, not slowness, just a quality of moving through the last hours of the day on will rather than energy. The iron sickness that had taken his father's full capacity had not found Ethan yet, but she had learned enough about the forge to know what decades of coal dust did to a man's lungs, and she had watched him cough on a cold morning and say nothing about it. He came in at sunrise. He left after dark. In between, he fixed everything the town brought him, charged what people could afford rather than what the work was worth, and made an iron horse before sunrise for a boy who had asked a question in October. She had found out about the iron horse by accident. He had been working on it when she arrived one Tuesday morning, had covered it quickly when he heard her come in, but not quickly enough. She had seen a small iron horse, every detail precise, perfectly balanced. "For Thomas Henderson," she said. He looked up briefly. "He asked me last month if iron horses were real. I told him they could be." He had gone back to work. She sat on her stool and watched him work and thought about what kind of man makes an iron horse before sunrise for a 7-year-old boy, and then covers it when someone comes in so they won't make anything of it. She thought about the forge as it really was. Not the romantic version she had constructed in her head, but the actual thing. The heat, the lung damage, the economics that didn't work. The physical toll accumulating in a 21-year-old body that was already marked by 10 years of it, and she thought, he does all of this every day for this town and half of them don't know his first name. That was the moment she stopped pretending her Tuesday visits were about metalwork. Wade Holloway asked Clara to the Christmas social in the first week of December. He came to the schoolhouse after the children had gone with the arranged flowers he had now made a habit of bringing, and asked with the easy confidence of a man who expects the answer to be yes. She looked at the flowers. She said she would think about it. After he left, she walked directly to the forge. Not on her usual path, not with any pretext, just directly there with the specific energy of someone who has been thinking about something long enough to need to say it. Ethan was finishing a set of hinges for the Calloway barn. He looked up when she came in. "No broken things today," he said. "No," she said. She sat on her stool and was quiet for a moment. "Wade Holloway asked me to the Christmas social," she said. Ethan set down the hinge he was working on. He looked at her, not with the careful non-expression he usually managed, but with something more direct and less controlled. "He's a good man," he said. "He is," she said. "You should go," he said. He picked up the hinge again. His voice was even. His hands were not entirely steady. She watched him pick up the hinge and go back to work with the focused precision of a man applying himself deliberately to a task. She watched his hands, the burns, the calluses, the permanent iron stain that no amount of washing removed. She watched the careful evenness of his voice saying, "You should go," while his hands gave him away. "Ethan," she said. He didn't look up. "I haven't decided yet," she said. He worked the iron. "You should go," he said again with the quiet conviction of a man who has already decided something about himself, about what a schoolteacher deserves and what a blacksmith can offer, and has closed the question before it fully opened. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she left. She had not decided anything, but she had learned something. "I want to stop here for just a moment. You know what gets me about Ethan right here? He tells her to go. He tells her to go because he genuinely believes she deserves better than what he is. That kind of self-eraser, it's not humility. It's a wound wearing humility's clothes. And Clara sees it. She sees it before he does. This story has found listeners in Brazil, in Nigeria, in India, in the Philippines, in Mexico, in South Africa. Everywhere. Every one of you found something in these two young people worth listening to. What country are you listening from today? Drop it in the comments. Every country, every language, every corner of the world. Now let's get back, because Wade Holloway is about to take Clara to a dance, and Ethan Carter is about to make the worst decision of his young life. Clara went to the Christmas social with Wade Holloway. She had decided after a week of thinking about it that she owed it to herself to be certain that the way Ethan had said you should go with steady voice and unsteady hands could mean something or nothing, and she was not going to misread the situation in either direction. So she went. Wade was everything Willow Creek said he was. Attentive, excellent company, a good dancer, genuinely charming. He told stories that made the whole room laugh. He introduced her to people she hadn't met. He was in every external measure the right choice. She danced 2 dances with him. On the third, she looked across the church hall and saw Ethan Carter standing at the far edge of the gathering. He had come. She had not expected him to come. He never came to social gatherings. She had been told this by 3 separate people, that the blacksmith kept to himself, that he worked too hard to have much use for celebrating. But he was there at the edge of the light in his good shirt with the soot washed off his hands, and he was watching her dance with Wade Holloway with the expression of a man watching something he has decided he has no right to want. She saw his face. She understood. The dance ended. Wade said something charming. She smiled and thanked him and told him she needed a moment of air. She walked to the door. She walked past the door. She walked all the way to the edge of the gathering where Ethan Carter was standing alone, and she stopped in front of him and said, "You came?" "I came," he said. His voice was doing the careful, even thing again. His hands, she noticed, were holding his hat so tightly the brim was bending. "Dance with me," she said. He looked at her, then at Wade Holloway across the room. "Miss Bennett." "Clara," she said. "My name is Clara, and I have been coming to your forge since October, and I am asking you to dance with me." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he put his hat down. You were doing just fine. Danced with her. He was not I do not want to step on your feet. He counted under his breath, and she didn't say a word about it. The day after the Christmas social, Ethan went back to work before sunrise. He was making the iron horse for Thomas Henderson, the one that needed to be done before Christmas, now 3 weeks away. He worked on it in the early dark, in the quiet before the town woke up, and tried to think about the iron and not about Clara Bennett looking at him across a crowded room and asking him to dance. He failed at the second part. She came that Thursday afternoon with a broken compass from the schoolroom, the needle loose from its housing. He fixed it in 10 minutes. She sat on the stool and they talked the way they had been talking for 3 months, easy and honest and specific. The kind of conversation he had never had with anyone before October. Then there was the comfortable pause. Wade is going to ask you again, he said. Not easily, the careful voice, but with something working underneath it. I know, she said. He's a good man, Clara. You keep saying that, she said. Because it's true. She looked at her coffee cup. One day, Ethan said, reaching for lightness he didn't quite feel. A cowboy is going to win your heart. He said it with a small smile, as a fact, a kindness almost. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up at him with those green-gray eyes. I'd rather it be a blacksmith, she said simply, looking directly at him. Ethan Carter looked at her. Then he laughed. The genuine laugh of a man who has heard something charming and unexpected, and has received it as exactly that. Charming, unexpected, not directed at him specifically. Well, he said, there aren't many of us left who are worth the trouble. He turned back to the compass. Clara looked at the forge fire for a long moment, at the steady heat of it, at the man who kept it burning, at the complete and total impossibility of this person not understanding that she was talking about him. Then she set down her coffee cup. Ethan, she said, I am talking about you. He looked up. The forge fire crackled. He stared at her. He started. I know, she said, which she had learned from him. Think about it. She stood up, picked up the compass, and walked out of the forge into the December afternoon. She was done being subtle. He thought about it. He thought about it for 4 days, which was 4 days of arriving at the same conclusion from every direction. He was 21 years old and covered in iron stain. And his father had worked the same. Forge and ended up with damaged lungs and arthritic hands at 45. And Clara Bennett was a schoolteacher who had been to normal school and could read Latin and deserved a man who could give her more than a 2-room house next to a forge. On the 5th day, Wade Holloway came to the forge. Not to cause trouble. Wade was not a man who caused trouble. He came to pick up a set of spurs Ethan had been repairing, and he was pleasant about it. And he said entirely without guile, I'm going to ask Miss Bennett properly before Christmas. I thought you should know since you two seem to be friends. Ethan took the payment for the spurs. She's a good woman, he said. She is, Wade said. I think she could be happy here with the right man. After Wade left, Ethan stood at the anvil for a long time without working. He thought about the 2-room house, about the lung damage that came with decades at the forge, about the iron stain that never fully washed out, about the evenings he was too tired to lift his arms above his head, about what it meant to ask someone to share that he had been a fool to let himself think about it at all. He went back to work. Clara came the following Tuesday. He was at the anvil and he did not put out the second stool, and he said when she arrived that he had a lot of work to finish and perhaps it would be better if he did not finish the sentence, because her expression stopped him. She stood in the forge door with the December light behind her, and she looked at him with the green-gray eyes that had been paying attention since September and said, Don't. Clara, don't, she said again. Not angry, just certain. Whatever you've decided, don't. He looked at his hands. She looked at his hands, too. I know what you're thinking, she said. You're wrong. She left before he could answer. He stood at the anvil for a long time after. He was not sure he was wrong. He was not sure of anything except that the forge felt considerably emptier than it had before October. And he had done that himself. and he was not certain he had done the right thing. It happened 3 days before Christmas. The Millbrook Creek Bridge at the north end of town had been weakening all autumn. The iron supports corroded. The timber water logged, and on a Wednesday morning after 2 days of rain with the creek running high, the south section gave way. A horse and wagon went into the water. The horse panicked. The wagon pinned the wheel against a submerged support beam. The driver, old Pete Dawson, 70 years old, the wagon too heavy for one man, couldn't get the horse free. The animal was going to break a leg or drown trying. W.D. Holloway was first on the scene. He went in on horseback, a good instinct. The right instinct for a man who knew horses, and tried to get a rope on the panicking animal. The horse was too far gone with fear. It wasn't working. Ethan heard the shouting from the forge. He came with tools, a prier, a heavy iron hook, a length of chain he had been using on a different job. He went into the water without the horse, which was the important difference. Wade was trying to calm the animal from above. Ethan went under to find the actual problem. The wagon wheel was locked against a crossbeam. Not jammed, locked. The axle fitting into a gap in the iron support at exactly the wrong angle. You couldn't pull it free. You had to lift it. He put the pry bar into the gap. He put his full weight on it. The iron bit into his hands through the gloves. He felt the familiar burn of metal at work, sharper in cold water. The kind of pain you categorize and set aside. The beam moved. Not enough. He repositioned, tried again. The water was at his chest and the current was pushing him. And Wade from above had finally gotten a rope on the horse and was holding it steady. And somewhere on the bank, Clara Bennett was watching with both hands over her mouth. The third time, the beam lifted enough. The wheel came free. The horse scrambled up the bank. Pete Dawson was pulled to safety by 3 men who had arrived from town. Ethan stood in the creek for a moment, chest deep in December water, then waded to the bank and sat on a rock and looked at his hands. Thigh-size indeed, the palms were burned from the iron in cold water. Not badly, but enough. He was pulling off the gloves when Clara came through the crowd and crouched in front of him, and took his hands in hers without asking. She looked at the burns. She looked at him. "I know what you're thinking," he said before she could speak. It came out differently than he intended. Not a deflection this time, but a surrender. "I've been thinking it for 2 weeks." She held his hands. And she said, "And I was wrong," he said, "about what I can offer you. I was wrong about that." She looked at him for a long moment. Behind them, the town was moving, talking, pulling the wagon up the bank. Nobody was watching them. "You went into freezing water," she said, "with a pry bar to save a horse." "It needed saving," he said. "I know," she said. "That's what I've been trying to tell you for 3 months." Wade came to the forge the next morning. He stood in the doorway and watched Ethan working with bandaged hands, not resting. Working, because there was always work, and said, "You know, I'm not going to ask her now." "You don't have to do that," Ethan said. "I know." Wade said, "I'm doing it anyway." He came further into the forge and looked around at the tools and the anvil and the ordered precision of the space. "She watched you in that water yesterday. I saw her face." He picked up a horseshoe from the bench, one of Ethan's, turned it in his hands. "I've been telling myself she'd come around, that she needed time." He set the shoe down. "She didn't need time. She just wasn't looking at me." Ethan said nothing. "You know what the difference is?" Wade said, not bitterly. "Genuinely, you fixed the actual problem, the wheel. I mean, I was working the symptom. You went to the root of it." He almost smiled. "She figured that out about you before I did." He put his hat back on. He extended his hand. Ethan shook it. "One thing," Wade said at the door. "She's been patient for 3 months. Don't make her wait any longer." He walked back out into the December morning. Ethan looked at his bandaged hands. He thought about Clara holding them on the bank of the creek in front of the whole town. He thought about 3 months of Tuesday mornings and the stool he had put out every Monday evening. He thought about a woman who had said, "I'd rather it be a blacksmith," and meant it, and had been waiting for him to understand that he was the blacksmith she meant. He was 21 years old and covered in iron stain, and his hands were burned, and he had the clearest idea he had ever had of exactly what he needed to do. He went to the schoolhouse that afternoon. He had never been to the schoolhouse, had no reason to before. He stood at the door after the children had gone and knocked, which felt strange after 3 months of walking into his own forge and finding her there. Clara opened the door. She looked at his bandaged hands, then at his face. "Come in," she said. He came in. He stood in the middle of the schoolroom. The desks, the chalkboard, the lending library she had reorganized in October, and held his hat in his bandaged hands and said, "I've been thinking about what I can offer you." "Ethan, let me finish," he said, not rudely, just with the focus of a man who has prepared something and is committed to saying it. "I've been telling myself it wasn't enough. The forge, the 2 rooms, the iron stain that won't wash out, the cost of it. I've been telling myself you deserved better." He looked at the hat in his hands. "I was making the decision for you, which is not." He stopped, started again. "You're a school teacher. You make decisions for 30 students every day. You don't need me making them for you." Clara was very still. "No," she said. "I don't. I fixed Widow Patterson's gate," he said, which came out slightly disconnected from what had come before, but which she understood completely. "And I didn't tell anyone. And I made the horse for Thomas. And I don't do those things for recognition. I do them because they need doing. But I need you to know that I know they're not nothing. That I'm not." He looked up at her. "I'm not nothing." "I know," she said. And this time it was her using the word he had taught her. The "I know" that means I have always known. That means you are the last person in this room to understand this. He looked at her with the blue eyes that had been deciding since September. And she looked at him with the green-gray ones that had been decided since October. And the December light came through the schoolhouse windows and fell across the chalkboard and the lending library, and the 2 of them standing in the middle of it. He kissed her, not tentatively. He had been careful about everything for 3 months, and he was done being careful. She kissed him back with the complete conviction of a young woman who has been right about something for a very long time, and is now simply living inside the proof of it. When they stepped back from each other, she looked at his bandaged hands and then at his face and said, "The iron horse." He looked at her. "Thomas doesn't know it's from me yet," he said. "I know," she said. "I want to be there when he finds out." He looked at her for a moment. "All right," he said simply, completely, as if that was the easiest agreement he had ever made. Thomas Henderson found the iron horse on his doorstep on Christmas morning. Clara was there, not at the doorstep, at a careful distance, standing with Ethan at the end of the road, where they could see the Henderson porch without being seen. They watched Thomas come out in the early light, still in his nightclothes, and find the small iron horse on the step with no note. Thomas picked it up, turned it in his hands, looked at it the way a 7-year-old looks at something he has been told is impossible and has just found to be true. Then he ran back inside to show his mother. Clara looked at Ethan. He was watching the Henderson house with the expression of a man who has done something that cost him nothing and meant everything. "He doesn't know it was you," she said. "No," he said. "Does it matter?" He thought about it honestly, the way he thought about everything. "No," he said, "the horse is what matters." She took his hand, the bandaged one, carefully. He let her. January came. Clara stopped inventing reasons to visit the forge and started arriving with 2 cups of coffee at 7 in the morning, because that was what Tuesday mornings were now. And everyone in Willow Creek understood this within the first week and made their peace with it at varying speeds. Wade Holloway was gracious about it, which elevated everyone's opinion of him. Martha Greer found it unexpected and told everyone, which was her version of approval. Thomas Henderson told his entire class that the blacksmith had made him a real iron horse, and that Mr. Carter was the best man in Texas. Nobody argued with him. The forge in February was the same as it had always been. Before sunrise, after dark, the heat and the cold dust and the iron stain and the work that never fully ended. What was different was the second cup of coffee on the bench at 7, and Clara, on the stool with her lesson books, and the particular silence that sits between two people who have stopped trying to impress each other and arrived somewhere more permanent. On a morning in February, Ethan was working a piece of iron into something small that he covered quickly when she came in. She saw it. She said nothing. Some things are worth waiting to understand. She sat on her stool. He sat on his. The forge fire did what forge fires do. Outside Willow Creek went about its business. The cowboys at the saloon, the farmers at the feed store, the ordinary life of a Texas town in 1886, and inside a young blacksmith who had been working since he was 11, and a young schoolteacher who had come looking for something worth staying for sat together in the warmth of the fire, and it was without question exactly right. Ethan Carter went into a freezing creek with a prior because a horse needed saving. He didn't think about it. He saw the actual problem, not the symptom, not the obvious thing everyone else was working on. And he went to the root of it. Burned hands, December water, current pushing him sideways, clears throat. He found the angle that worked, and he applied his weight to it until the thing moved. That's not heroism. That's just Ethan. That's what he had been doing his whole life, finding the actual problem and fixing it without announcement. An iron horse made before sunrise. A gate fixed without charge. A roof that couldn't wait until after the holiday. 10 years of work that the town took for granted because he never made them notice it. And a young woman who noticed anyway. I think about Clara sometimes, about what it takes to look at a town full of men on horseback and choose to pay attention to the man at the forge. To see someone clearly past what they earn and what they wear and what the town has decided about their worth. To say I'd rather it be a blacksmith and mean it, and then wait 3 months for the blacksmith to believe you. That kind of patience is its own form of courage. The most valuable people in any room are rarely the ones in the light. They are the ones keeping the fire going. Look for the person keeping the fire going. Thank you for riding with me today. Wherever you are, I am grateful you were here. Until next time, keep riding.